students, I am now going to introduce you to a video that I did about a year ago of me reading Banning Plastic Bags is Good for the Environment, Not So Fast. It is a really good little piece. I'm reading out loud, but it came from the They Say, I Say textbook tutorial, so that's why it seems a little bit weird. You can just get a hold of this by clicking on the link inside the assignment, and you'll be able to read along with me. Along with you guys, right? It says, banning plastic bags is great for the world, right? Not so fast. By Ben Adler. Like cigarettes, plastic bags have recently gone from a tolerated nuisance to a widely despised and discouraged vice. Last month, the New York City Council passed a 5-cent per bag fee on single-use bags handed out by most retailers. So we know, right, last month, we know that this doesn't mean that this is a recent article, right? This happened a few years back. 2 weeks ago, the Massachusetts State Senate passed a measure that would ban plastic bags from being dispensed by many retail businesses and require a charge of 10 cents or more for a recycled paper or reusable bag. The Massachusetts proposal may not become law this year, but it is the latest sign that the plastic bag industry is losing this war. Already in Massachusetts, 32 towns and cities have passed bans or fees. So have at least 88 localities in California, including the city of Los Angeles and San Francisco, plus cities and towns in more than a dozen other states and more than a dozen other countries. So now we kind of know the situation, right, of what's happening. The adverse impacts of plastic bags are undeniable. Okay, so we know that that's going to be one of the main ideas here. And that's sort of what they say, right? Everybody does kind of say that they're undeniable. When they're not piling up in landfills, they're blocking storm drains, littering streets, getting stuck in trees, and contaminating oceans where fish, seabirds, and other marine animals eat them or get tangled up in them. A longtime plastic bag adversary, Ian Fraser, recently reported in the New Yorker, and here's another they say, right? Here's a they say. So let's go ahead and look, here's what they say. In 2014, plastic bags were the 7th most common item collected during the Ocean Conservancy's International Coastal Cleanup, behind smaller debris such as cigarette butts, plastic straws, and bottle caps. The New York City Sanitation Department collects more than 1,700 tons of single-use carry-out bags every week and has to spend $12.5 million a year to dispose of them. Bans cut this litter off at the source, right? So here's another they say. Oops. Let me, sorry. And it asks you in the tutorial to highlight. In San Jose, California, a plastic bag ban led to an 89% reduction in the number of plastic bags winding up in the city's storm drains. Fees have a smaller but significant effect. Washington, D.C.'s government estimates that its 5-cent bag tax has led to a 60% decrease in the number of bags being used, although that figure is contested by other sources. So we have this big they say, right? He puts forth the argument for the other side, right? Is plastic really worse than paper? So now we're kind of flipping it. We're going to actually ask those questions. But advocates of these laws and journalists who cover the issue often neglect to ask what will replace plastic bags and what the environmental impact of that replacement be. People still need plastic bags to bring home their groceries, and the most common substitute, paper bags, may be just as worse, depending on the environmental problem you're most concerned about, right? So here's his I say, right? This is what the author says. Maybe plastic bags or maybe paper bags are just as bad. That's leading to a split in the anti-bag movement. Some bills, like in Massachusetts, try to reduce the usage of plastic bags as well as plastic, but still favor paper. Others, like in New York City, treat all single-use bags equally. Even then, the question remains as to whether single-use bags are necessarily always worse than reusable ones. Studies of bags' environmental impact over the life cycle have reached widely varying conclusions. Okay, so here's a they say, right? And I'm not really using these colors in any particular order. Some are funded by plastic industry groups like the ironically named American Progressive Bag Alliance. Even studies conducted with the purest of intentions depend on any number of assumptions. How many plastic bags are replaced by one cotton tote bag? If a plastic bag is reused in the home as a garbage bag in the bathroom waste bin, does that reduce its footprint by eliminating the need for another small plastic garbage bag? If your chief concern is climate change, things get even muddier. Okay, so here he has another I say right here, right? So here's an I say. I think I was doing pink. One of the most comprehensive research papers on the environmental impact of bags, published in 2007 by an Australian state government agency, found that paper bags have a higher carbon footprint than plastic. That's primarily because more energy is required to produce and transport paper bags. People look at paper and say it's degradable, therefore it's a much better for the environment. But it's not in terms of climate change. It's not in terms of climate change impact, says David Tyler, a professor of chemistry at the University of Oregon, who has examined the research on the environmental impact of bag use. So here is another they say. Here's David Tyler's they say. The reasons for paper's higher carbon footprint are complex, but can mostly be understood as stemming from the fact that paper bags are much thicker than plastic bags. Very broadly, carbon footprints are proportional to the mass of an object, says Tyler. For example, because paper bags take up so much more space, more trucks are needed to ship paper bags to a store than are needed to ship plastic bags. Looking beyond climate change, still, many environmentalists argue that plastic is worse than paper. And so here's another they say, right? So here's a they say. Climate change, they say, right? Here's an exact they say, isn't the only form of environmental degradation to worry about. Paper does have its own environmental consequences in terms of how much energy it takes to generate. Acknowledges Emily Norton, director of the Massachusetts Sierra Club. The big difference is that paper does biodegrade eventually. Plastic is a toxin that stays in our environment, marine animals ingest it, and it enters their bodies and then ours. Some social justice advocates who work in low-income urban neighborhoods or communities of color also argue that plastic bags are a particular scourge. A lot of the waste ends up in our communities, says Elizabeth Yempierre, executive director of Uprose, an environmental and social justice-oriented community organization in Brooklyn. Plastic bags not only destroy the physical infrastructure, she says, referring to the way they clog up storm drains and other systems, they contribute to emissions. And she points out that marine plastic pollution is a threat to low-income people who fish for their dinner. So many frontline communities depend on food coming from the ocean. That's why her group supported New York's bag fee, even though it is more of a burden on lower-income citizens. And so actually, here's what they say. Right. Let's see, a single mom or someone working 2 jobs is more likely to have to do her shopping in a rush on the way home from work than to go out specifically with a tote bag in hand. But for Uprose, that concern is outweighed by the negative impacts of plastic bags on disadvantaged communities. Increasingly, environmentalists are pushing for laws that include fees for all single-use bags, and that requires bags to be made with recycled content, which could lower their carbon footprint. The measure now under consideration in Massachusetts, for example, would mandate that single-use paper bags contain at least 40% recycled fiber. That's the percentage the Massachusetts Sierra Club has advocated for at the state level and when lobbying for municipal bag rules. And now we know we're going to switch again, right? Back It's complicated. But what if reusable bags aren't good either, right? So we're asking the question, and we kind of get that that might be this person's they say, or I say, I'm sorry. As the Australian study noted, a cotton bag has a major environmental impact of its own. Only 2.4% of the world's cropland is planted with cotton, yet it accounts for 24% of the global market for insecticides and 11% for pesticides, the World Wildlife Fund reports. A pound of cotton requires more than 5,000 gallons of water on average, a thirst far greater than that of any vegetable and even most meats. And cotton, unlike paper, is not currently recycled in most places. The Australian study concluded that the best option appears to be a reusable bag, but one made from recycled plastic, not cotton. Right, so actually here's another they say, because that is their determination. A substantial shift to more durable bags would deliver environmental gains through reductions in greenhouse gases, energy and water use, resource depletion, and litter, the study concluded. The shift from one single-use bag to another bag may improve one environmental outcome, but be offset by other environmental impacts. But studies conducted in Australia and Europe have limited 15 applicability in the U.S., particularly when you're considering climate impact, because every country has a different energy mix. In fact, every region of the U.S. has a different in the region of the U.S. has a different energy mix. Sorry, that makes sense. There is no easy answer, says Eric Goldstein, a New York environment. So here's another, like they say. New York City environmental director for the Natural Resources Defense Council, which backed New York City's bag fee. There are so many variables. Here's just one tiny example. Does the paper for paper bags come from a recycled mill on Staten Island or a virgin forest in northern Canada? As far as I know, nobody has done the definitive analysis, which would necessarily need to have a large number of caveats and qualifications. Also, this question is something like asking, would you prefer to get a parking ticket or a tax assessment? It depends on the specifics, but it is better to avoid both whenever possible. Goldstein is confident that if people switch to reusable bags, even cotton ones, and use them consistently, allergies, that will ultimately be better for the environment. The ideal city bag policy would probably involve charging for paper and plastic single-use bags, as New York City has decided to do, while giving out reusable plastic bags to those who need them, especially to low-income communities and seniors. Those crunchy rich should already have more than enough PBS or tote bags from PBS and Whole Foods. The larger takeaway is that no bag is free of environmental impact. Okay, so here's his I say, right? Whether that's, let me go ahead and put this. So here's his I say. I think I was kind of putting that in pink. Whether that's contributing to climate change, ocean pollution, water scarcity, or pesticide use. The instinct to favor reusable bags springs from an understandable urge to reduce the chronic overconsumption, but the bags we use are not the problem. Let me kind of erase this. Eat one less meat dish a week, and that's what will have real impact on the environment, says Tyler. It's what we put in the bag at the grocery store that really matters, right? Okay, so there is my highlighting, and here's kind of an example of how they did it. I kind of did it with the different they says. Thank you so much, students, for reading along with me. I hope that made sense. You kind of got the idea. You do have a copy of that available on the assignment page. And with that, if you have more questions or anything, let me know. I know the volume's a little low on there. I think it was before I got my really good microphone. So make sure you go ahead and turn up the volume if you didn't already. And with that, I will see you online.